In the previous video, we have seen how to add a new user with an encrypted password to the database. In this video, we will see how to authenticate users with email and password. So let's add a new Authenticate user function. As we will be using async await, let's add try-catch block also. Now let's see how the postman request will look like. I will duplicate this request. Let's say authenticate user. The request method will be post only. And in the body of the request, we will be sending only email and password. So we can access those email and password values using object destructuring from request.body. So how we will be authenticating? So we first need to check if that particular email exists in the database. To do that, we can use find_one method on the user model. Here, we have find and find_one method. Find returns an array of matching records, but as email is unique, there will be only one user with the provided email, so we will use find_one method. If there is no matching record, find_one method will return null. And we will filter records based on email property. So the property we want to check is email. And the value we're getting is coming from destructured the email variable. And when the property name and variable holding the value are same, we can use ES6 shorthand syntax. So if there is a user with the provided email, we will get back that user information. Otherwise, find_one will return null. So we can add a condition to return an error if there is no matching user. So I will copy this. And for the message, we can say, user not found with the provided email. And for the status code, we can say 404 indicating not found. And we will also add a return statement here. So if we return an error, we don't want to execute next lines of code, so it's very important to have a return keyword here. Now, if we found the user, then we need to validate the password to check if it matches with that particular user password. So to do that, we can use compare method of bcrypt library. It accepts the original password and the hashed password as arguments. And it returns a promise with a value of true or false. So for the first argument, we will pass password, which is the plain text password that we're getting from the user. If there is matching user, we're getting user object back which contains the hashed password, so we can use that as the second argument. And we can store the result of compare method in isMatching variable. As compare method returns a promise, we will add an await keyword here. Now we can console log the isMatching variable value. And if there is an error, we will send back an error message. Error while authenticating user. Default status code will be 500. So we don't need to specify it again. Now we can export this method, so we can use it in other files. Now we can add a root for that method. So the API URL will be /users/login for authenticating user. So it will be a post root with /login at the end. If you check index.js file, we have root path, /API/users and then /login. Here, instead of add user, we will call Authenticate user method. If I send the request now, you can see it's in pending state because we're not returning anything back using response.send. But in the console, you can see isMatching is true. So let's call response.send so the request will not be stuck. Because we entered correct credentials, we got isMatching true, but if I send wrong email, then we should get an error. You can see, we get user not found error. Because user with this email does not exist. Now let's say email is valid but password is invalid. We get 200 OK status because we're not checking condition if isMatching is false or not. So if the password is not matching, we should return an error back. Now the status will be 400 and message will be invalid credentials. If I send the request again, you will see invalid credentials error because the password is incorrect. But if the password is matching, then we should return the user information back to the client, which is Postman in our case. So we will send user back. Now, if I enter correct credentials, we should get the user information back, and it's coming as expected. One thing you might have noticed is that we're sending back private information like password even though it's encrypted. Even with add user root, after creating a new user, we are sending back the password in the response, which is not a good thing. Because user might have some other private information, for example, billing information. So we should send back only the things which are needed and not everything from the user object. If you see, user is a model instance, so it contains extra properties. Therefore, to get the actual original object back, we need to use the toObject method provided by MongoDB.js library. Now we can use delete keyword to delete a particular property from the object. In our case, we want to delete only the password property. Now, instead of user, we can return user object. So, let me send the request again. As you can see, we don't get password back, which is what we wanted. But we don't want to write the same code for every route whenever we return the user back, so instead of adding code here, MongoDB.js provides a better way. So we can use userschema.methods.toJSON method. This method is automatically called when we call response.send method. So inside this method, we can say user equal to this. Here, this will refer to the actual user instance of the user model which is being inserted, updated, deleted, etc. Now here, we can use the toObject method and delete the password property from the user object. And we will return the user object from this method. Now, we can remove this code, and we will just return the normal user instance from the send method. Now let's resend the request. As you can see, we don't get the password in the response, which is as expected. So let's understand how the toJSON method is automatically getting called without manually calling it. Let me open Chrome DevTools. Let's say I have a user object with name and age properties. Now let me add a new toJSON method inside that object. The capitalization is important, so JSON has to be capitalized. Let me return string hello from this method. If I print the user object, we correctly get the entire user object back. But if I print the stringified user object, you can see, we get hello back instead of the user object. So, if we define a toJSON method inside any object, then whatever we return from that method will be returned as a result of JSON.stringify method. And Express.js internally calls the stringify method whenever we use response.send or response.json method. So, I can return anything from the toJSON method like user.age. And with JSON.stringify method, we get that age value as a string. So JSON.stringify method is automatically called whenever we use response.send or response.json method, which internally uses result of toJSON method. So that's how we can authenticate user and remove the unnecessary data instead of sending all the information back. Now with that toJSON method added to the model itself, if I add a new user, we will not get the password in the response. As you can see, we don't have password information in the response. So we don't have to manually remove the password from every root handler wherever we return the user object. So that's the advantage of adding toJSON method directly to the model. So that's it for this video. If you found this video useful, do like it and don't forget to subscribe to the channel.